Yeah, I
You
have a
know,
question. I have a question for you, fellas, and this is just like kind of. We don't have to talk about it for too long, but I just kind of wanted to, and I think Dre, I think you and I talked about this, and I just want to kind of address it and just kind of see where you guys are at. But like, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and a lot of people might have a different viewpoint, but I think Universal, they're big right now in the theme park industry, and they're only growing. They're only going up. In my opinion, I think they're depending a little too much on licensing out various IP. And what I mean by that is I think Universal is getting big enough now where they should start to sort of incorporate their own IP into their parks and not depend so much on outside IP. In my opinion, I think when you license stuff out, and we've seen issues with Disney even, with Marvel, how they licensed everything out. Remember, and now they're having issues with Marvel and the Sony Spider-Man thing a few years back. I think licensing out leads to problems down the road because eventually, relationships, corporate relationships, business relationships fall out eventually, or there's drama. I think Universal should focus more on internal IP. Dre, what do you think about this? Like, do you think that they should get out, not completely out of the licensing game, because obviously things like Harry Potter and stuff are still massive. But do you think Universal should start to focus more on more internalized IP and get away from and kind of like just kind of breaking away a little bit from the licensing, or do you think what they're doing is fine? You think it works for Universal? What are your opinion on that?
I mean, ideally, yeah. I mean, they the plan was always to get out of licensing and actually have robust IP that you can actually, build kind of franchise worlds around, right? That was always, I mean, that's going back to the 90s, early 2000s. I mean, they've really they've found that the Universal brand and its IP that it has under its belt. I mean, that's why they made the big cash drop for DreamWorks Animation, right? Because they really needed it. For years they've been criticized for not having the kind of family-friendly kind of IP that Disney has so much of, and that's really been a hindrance to their growth. That's why they have like stuff like Barney and all kinds of other little knickknacks in there. Woody Woodpecker in Universal or the Orlando parks. But look, yes, ideally you'd like to use your IP, but if it's just not significant enough, if it's not in the kind of cultural zeitgeist to the extent that you kind of need it, then there's nothing really you can do. Now, I will say, Universal's done a pretty good job at taking pretty much anything that they're given or that they go out and seek and transforming it into something that's worthwhile. That's for sure. But I mean, it is interesting. Before, this is kind of an interesting story. Before Marvel actually was part of the kind of development of Islands of Adventure, it was Warner Brothers. They were going to do like a kind of a superhero Gotham meets what is it? Superman's Metropolis.
Like a DC kind of centered kind of
like
land.
a DC kind of universe land, so to speak. They're gonna have a Batman ride, which was gonna be like an inverted B&M, and then you're gonna have a Superman attraction, all kinds of stuff, right?
Wow.
But unfortunately, those plans kind of fell through because they couldn't work out those deals with Universal to get the licensure that they needed. Obviously, they did deals with Six Flags, and Time Warner owned Six Flags for a while, and that's how that whole kind of thing went down. But I mean, it's always been a problem for them when it comes to IP. It just has been. Now Simpsons, who knows what's going to happen there? Maybe that's going to be a negotiation tactic that Bob Chapek pulls on. It's a very interesting thing that they would like to use their IP. If it was big enough in pop culture. Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Yeah, and Dre, you mentioned a great point real quick, and I'll go to you, George. But like, I just want to say, Dre, you mentioned a great point. The smartest thing Comcast has done in recent years was buy DreamWorks Animation. That was a brilliant move, and they should do more of that because that they need more of that IP library. Go ahead, George. Sorry about that, buddy.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, and also too, streaming plays a big part of, these companies that want to invest in something that could potentially fit into theme park revenue. So, like as you guys mentioned with The Simpsons,
Right.
because with the licensing of everything that, Disney has so much of it, well, it's already in Universal, and the same thing goes with Marvel. So it's like everyone wants a piece of that pie, so it's like depending on how well it does through streaming and how well it does through the pop culture and through people, wanting to go see it in theaters or buy it on the streaming services. It's like, well, we can incorporate this in the theme parks. And I think that's where a lot of these companies are trying to look at the bigger prize, so to speak, but all they really have to do is just look within their own company to make a good product. And I think that's where it's going to hurt them in the long run, because again, when you have all these companies battling for licensing for this part of this type of show or movie or these characters, and it's like you're breaking these characters up, and it's like, well, you can use them for this, but you can't use them for that. But this company can use it for this, and it's like it becomes a debacle.